Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining the Procure Partnerships Framework podcast today. Today we have got Matt Lancaster joining us from Bentley Project Management. He's a director there, and we're going to be talking all things quantity surveying. So without further ado, Matt, if you could just kind of introduce yourself and give us a little bit of an overview as to what a quantity surveyor is, the role that they do, and the type of scope of service that they carry out, just to kind of set the scene.
So my name's Matthew Lancaster. I'm from Bentley Project Management. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, working predominantly in the public sector. Probably got a specialism in education, but I have sort of dabbled in the private sector. So in terms of a QS and what we do, I think it's probably fair to start with when we get involved in projects and things like that. So particularly on public sector projects, we typically get engaged anywhere between sort of our IBA stages 0, 1 through to 2. This is slightly different than maybe with public sector clients, particularly experienced public sector clients who might bring the QS in at REVA stage 2, where QSs are brought in early at that very sort of strategic definition stage. I think it generally will be when they're supporting councils and local authorities with funding bids, sort of recent things like levelling up and town deal funding. Pre-contract then, our key responsibilities, generally cost planning, monitoring the design as it develops through stages 2 to 4. And I think it's those key stages where the QS's skill is in balancing quality, cost and delivery. We'll work with the project manager to develop the procurement and tendering strategy and ultimately agree on the most appropriate form of contract. As it moves towards sort of the end of stage 3/4, we'll prepare the tender documents. And then when the tenders come back in, we'll analyse and evaluate the returns. We'll conduct any negotiations and conclude those negotiations to enable the award of contract with the contractor. Just one thing I did know was that and maybe worth raising, that on public sector projects, we are finding more and more that local authorities and councils will prepare their own contract documents in-house. It's probably a little bit of a change that we're finding recently. When the project is on site, so post-contract, we'll undertake monthly evaluations and agree variations with the contractors. We try and do this in a timely manner. Some forms of contract like NEC are obviously very prescriptive as to timescales, but even with JCT, we try and get those agreed as quickly as possible. Just with this whole thing about ensuring that our financial reports, the monthly financial reports, are as accurate as possible. When the job finishes on site, obviously we'll settle the final account. After that, release of retentions. To be honest, stages sort of 6 to 7. Quite a limited role. We might get involved in things like managing closeout of defects and things like that. But yeah, I think ultimately our role sort of ends on completion of the job and settlement of the final account.
Good stuff. Busy role then, lots to do. Brilliant. I just wanted to pick up on a point that you mentioned there, Matt, around you're seeing more and more public sector bodies kind of developing their own contract documents in-house. Do you think there's a particular reason for that as to why that's kind of changing? That, anything kind of spring to mind in terms of reasons why?
Not particularly. I think they are very keen on making sure that there's contract amendments in there for things like social values and things like that.
Yes.
So whether that is a reason. But yeah, it's just something that we found, and I think that's the point I raised it, that it's something that has come up maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, and I think certainly the more experienced QSs, it might come as a bit of a surprise, and
yes.
But yeah, it's just something that we have noticed, that they seem very keen to do their own contract documents recently.
No, really interesting. Good point. No, thank you for bringing it up. Obviously, then we know that accurate cost planning is absolutely critical, and a lot of projects that get procured through Procure Partnerships Framework, are seeing a couple of, I suppose, cost challenges, just in terms of the landscape of the market at the moment, and kind of funding restrictions and lots of other reasons why kind of cost planning is so important. Are there any particular methods that quantity surveyors use to forecast costs accurately, particularly for those public sector projects, just to make sure that it is possible to stick to budgets that are kind of discussed up front?
Well, I think cost planning and accurate cost planning has become critical, as you've said. And I think at Bentley's, like probably the majority of QS firms out there now, we have invested in dedicated resources to pull together benchmark cost data from all the projects we're involved in. We use that benchmarking cost data to prepare the estimates. I think we try not to rely too much on other sources such as BCIS and things like that. I think just having that real live data is key. I am a firm believer that QSs should pick up the phone and speak with suppliers to get budgets. I think that soft market testing can help with market intelligence about any sort of industry price increases that are coming up. Can also use that to speak about any material shortages. Probably like every QS firm, we are governed and regulated by the RICS. So, in terms of things like inflation, we have to use things like BCIS, tender price index, or the general cost building index. It's quite difficult to go away from them things, I think, from an insurance point of view and your PI.
Yes.
On the larger scale infrastructure projects that we use, there are times that we have to use specific engineering indices or the consumer price index. But yeah, I mean, one of the points that I have written down is that we do try to comply fully with industry standards. So, we try and stick to the letter of the RICS new rules of measurement or the method of measurement for highway works. That just enables us to capture all the cost headings, particularly those below the line headings around contingencies, risks and things like that. So I think that is key to accurate cost planning. Yeah,
okay. Lots of different ways then that we can make sure that we're getting as accurate cost plans as we can, which is absolutely fantastic. Matt, can you give us any project examples where kind of early quantity surveying involvement has perhaps prevented any kind of financial difficulties around the cost plan?
Yeah, so early QS involvement can definitely prevent issues further down the line. I do think that QSs are very good at flagging potential risks to clients and making allowances in cost plans. I think that we do consider site abnormals. And we generally make allowances from in estimates, particularly around things like ground conditions, in terms of contaminated material. We might put an item in for extra overcost for piling, things like that. We'll also put in allowances, things like drainage attenuation, which may or may not be required, sustainability features in respect of M&E.
Okay, so what happens then when a project that you're working on looks like it might come in over budget? How do you kind of break the news to the clients, and what kind of solutions do you propose to get the project sort of budget back in line?
So on this, I think one of the key messages that I try to give our younger staff is that we are cost managers, so we're not simply reporters of cost.
Absolutely.
And probably stress to them that there's probably two key points in the life cycle of a project. The first key point is probably when the project is out to tender. And I think it's really important to get a very, very robust pre-tender estimate prepared. If it becomes obvious that the tender returns are going to come back over budget, I think you've got to be proactive and present solutions to the client. And I think you do that basically by sort of speaking with specified suppliers and look at alternatives. But I think one of the key things is that be ready with ideas that will bring the project back on budget. I think the second key point is obviously then when the works are progressing on site. And I think this links back to what I said earlier about accurate financial reporting. We have to highlight any areas of cost risk, highlight any potential disputes that could arise with the contractor. And I think the overriding message is that you've got to be open with clients and don't sit on things and just hope that they go away. But then in terms of, I suppose, the strategy that we employ is at the very early stages of a project. So maybe at RIBA stages sort of 2 or 3, we'll develop and maintain an opportunities register, which will sit alongside the risk register, basically. And that opportunities register will be used as a tool to identify where value engineering or scope adjustment could be made if required. And I think what we try to do with that is to agree with the client any sort of nice to haves that they would be prepared to sacrifice if they need to. And I think by doing that, even if we have to implement something when the works are on site, it's not come as a total shock to them. You're not suddenly faced with a situation where you're cutting back massively on finishers or not doing something to the external works and things like that. So we do find that quite a useful tool.
Yeah, I suppose it's all about kind of managing expectations, isn't it? And communicating and like you say, highlighting what could be let go as part of that nice to have list, and what is absolutely essential to make the project kind of safe and successful in the round. So no, that's really interesting. That really interesting point. Thanks, Matt. In terms of public sector bodies who are looking to engage with a quantity surveyor, then are there any kind of tips or tricks you would give them in terms of sort of what to look out for when engaging with a quantity surveyor? Is there any kind of best practice you can share, or anything that should perhaps be avoided?
I think one of the things is definitely to bring the QS in as early as possible. And again, there's 2 points here. I think one of the first is to make sure that you get the QS involved before the budget is ultimately signed off.
Yes.
There is this thing that everybody sort of plays QS in the early stages of a project, and they may try to fix the budget on a previous project, using benchmark costs from a previous project. And then I think the second point is to make sure that you get some QS input before the concept design is sort of presented to any stakeholders or anybody further up the food chain, because we do find that, once the budget is set, or if those early designs have been circulated within a business or as I say, to different department heads, it's almost fixed. And if we don't come in till after that point, it's quite a challenge for us to try and get it back on budget or maintain it on budget. So I think they would be my two things. I think the other thing is, in terms of appointing a QS, I think you have to make sure that you appoint a QS with a proven track record in that sector. So if you're building a new school, there's no point appointing a surveying firm who specialise in sort of public sector retail market. You've got to have that benchmarking cost data that you can rely on. And things like that. And as I say, I think the other thing is to make sure that you appoint a QS as early as possible in the process, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Matt, thank you so much. I think we've covered a lot of points there around benefits of appointing a quantity surveyor and how to get the most out of a quantity surveyor appointment. But just to kind of end and conclude, just so that we've had a bit of a balanced conversation, I just wondered whether there were any red flags or warning signs that jump to your mind that public sector bodies should be aware of when appointing a QS, just to make sure that those are avoided.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be very obvious from the presentation of material and the format of cost estimates that are prepared, and that can be the level of detail that's presented. Just focusing on cost plans. I mean, if there's a lack of measured quantities within the estimate, and it's simply tying elemental cost back to gross floor areas and things like that. Red flags could be that there's a large number of composite items, so literally, roof one number or things like that, or a high volume of provisional sums. Also, if there's pages and pages of assumptions, clarifications, exclusions from the estimate, I mean, that's obviously quite an easy red flag. I do think it's fair for clients to ask questions, though, about how the estimate has been prepared, specifically around those percentage additions, things like prelims, overhead profit, contingency levels. How have they been assessed? What are they based on? I do think that clients should ask the question about how it compares with other projects from a benchmark point of view. And I think when we produce estimates, I think what we try to do is include a comparison, maybe against BCIS or other in-house cost data. It's just to give that level of confidence to the client that the number that we're presenting to them is representative of the market.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Matt. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground there in terms of tips and tricks on how to appoint a quantity surveyor, what exactly that role is, and how to get the most out of that appointment. So thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Really, really appreciate your input there. If anybody listening would like any more information on what we've discussed today, please do visit the Procure Partnerships Framework website, which is just procurepartnerships.co.uk. There's lots of information on our website there. If you aren't also already aware, Procure Partnerships Framework are currently launching their new iteration of their professional services framework, which means you will be able to appoint professional services consultants through Procure Partnerships Framework. So again, lots of information on our website, all about the new professional services framework. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.